From Ticker, this is Black Belt Leader. Here's Karen Gately.
Welcome to Black Belt Leader, proudly powered by Miller Leith Recruitment Specialist and Career Services Provider. I'm Karen Gately, the founder of Corporate Dojo. On the show today, we'll be talking about gender bias in the workplace. Let's start by looking at some facts about gender workplace statistics at a glance in Australia. 35.2% of boards and governing bodies have no female directors. By contrast, only 0.9% had no male directors. Women hold 3.7% of chair positions, 25.8% of directorships, and 17.1% of CEOs. 30.5% of key management personnel. When we look at another set of facts, however, it's clear that those statistics are not in fact reflective of education standards. Of all women aged 20 to 24, 89.9% have attained Year 12 qualifications or above, compared to 84.4% of men in the same age bracket. Of all women aged 25 to 29, 44.7% have achieved a bachelor degree or above, compared to 32.1% of similarly aged men. So joining us now to have a chat about this issue is gender bias specialist, Dr. Karen Morley. She's the author of new book, Beat Gender Bias, How to Play a Better Part in a More Inclusive World. So we think she's clearly ideally positioned to talk to us today about this topic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Karen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Congratulations on your new book, and clearly it's a topic that is well needed out there.
Yes, absolutely. I thought with the coronavirus we might kind of move that off of the agenda, but what we've actually seen is that it's become even more important to think about gender balance and to remove biases at this time.
Yeah. So why is that? Help me to understand what you're seeing right now and, why it's particularly relevant.
Yeah, and I think that the big issue we still have to tackle, and the reason that we have such difficulty changing those numbers that you've gone through, is that we still have a lot of biases, and many of those biases actually sit below the surface. Yeah. And so we're often making decisions that we don't even know we're making and we don't even agree with. Yeah. One of the issues we've seen in the workplace is that women are often doing the office housework. So we expect women to provide support to others and not necessarily to promote themselves and their careers as strongly as we do men. It's just not as acceptable to do that. Yeah. So transition to working from home, and women are looking after the home, and there are a lot of changes there because of the virus, with children at home looking after their schooling. Yeah. So that's meant that the burden of housework has increased, as well as office housework. Yeah. So I've seen a number of families where the extra burdens are being shared equally amongst various partners and the children. But there are a lot of stories that I hear about the impact on women. We've seen and heard about the impact in terms of domestic violence, but also women are cutting back on the hours they're working because they're too stressed. So there are a lot of challenges, I think, that are coming home to women more strongly during this time. Yeah. On the other hand, of course, we're learning that working from home is not such a difficult thing or a bad thing. And so there's definitely a silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to report I'm one of the women in the world that doesn't relate to these things. I've been very fortunate to have a full-time husband. He was raising children for over 20 years, and but I am enormously empathetic to the realities that a lot of women face, and obviously that juggle between the kids and the home care. And as you've just pointed out, I've also seen some of those things in the workplace. Who gets to look after the kitchen? Often the girls. So yes. What do you think bias is? Do you think it's built into our brains? I mean, you've already pointed to the fact or alluded to the fact that it's often unconscious. What's going on here?
I think there is conscious and unconscious beliefs that impact on the decisions we make. One of the reasons that it's so hard to shift and we keep needing to do different things and think about it differently does come down to some of our hardwiring. Daniel Kahneman made biases actually quite important and relevant to us. So we know that our brain works on two different levels. We've got a fast automatic processing part of our brain, which is really helpful for us. We don't have to think about things. We don't have to actively recall them. We're able to just go with the flow and make decisions. And that's really important for our mastery and our sense of development. And then we make slow decisions. So there's a slow part of our brain, which is the conscious part of our brain, where we actively make decisions and we're aware that we're making the decisions. Now, most of us think that all of our decisions are happening there, but actually they're not. When you look at the sort of neuroscience data, what it shows us is that the conscious brain can make about 8 decisions, deal with 8 pieces of information in a second, which sounds quite a lot, until you know that the unconscious processing in our brain can deal with between 8 and 40 million pieces of information in 1 second. So you can see it's this amazing super processor, and it's got a lot of benefits for us. The challenge is when we use that automatic processing about people. So the automatic processing is based on stereotypes and how we understand people. So we've got particular views, traditional views, stereotypes about men and women. Women are supportive, kind, nurturing, sensitive, soft, warm. That's what we expect them to be. Men, on the other hand, are bold and determined, agentic and competent. And so those differences and those prescriptions around how the genders are meant to behave may not be something we agree with, and I certainly don't. But it's because we've learned them and they're in the air around us, these gender prescriptions. When we're not paying attention to our decisions, when we're using that fast processing, we might not slow down and we might not realize we're even making a decision. Then those kinds of expectations can filter into the decision we're making, and we don't necessarily know it has. So we end up with a decision. We're not aware we've been biased. We're not aware that those, if you like, the stereotypes have influenced our decision. Nevertheless, this is the sort of processing that means that we might have equal numbers of women who come into a selection process for a senior role, but when we get to the shortlist, we find that we've got 25% women and 75% men.
And what's usually, what's your observation there? So what's that unconscious decision that's been taken that results in there being more men on that shortlist?
I think it's a series of unconscious decisions. What makes for a better decision is having very criteria, slowing down and being quite deliberate about the decision-making process, making sure that you're considering a range of different options and possibilities from people who don't necessarily think in the same way, and then making sure the decision is open to scrutiny by others. So it needs to be a transparent decision-making process. So when those kinds of things are in play, we reduce the opportunity for bias. What we know from interview panels is that if we're not explicitly assessing each particular person against the criteria, and we're not allowing each panel member to make up their own mind and award points for how well each person meets the criteria, groupthink comes into play. So if somebody's got a divergent view about a particular candidate, it's not likely to get the same amount of airtime. And so there's a myriad of little tiny points in time where the biases can come into play. There's some research about, US companies, some of the, top Fortune 500 companies, where 75% of the HR leaders there say that their identification of talent for senior roles is actually done by senior leaders, and it's not done in any systematic way.
Yeah.
Who do you think
certainly.
will be right for your job in the future? Oh, I think X is going to be right for that.
Yeah.
Right for buyers.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean it's guaranteed,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that people are trying to be biased.
Yeah.
But those natural underlying beliefs just come into our decision making.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. Well, thank you so much. Again, congratulations on your book. Where can our viewers get a copy of it?
From my website is probably the best place, which is karenmorley.com.au.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate you being with us here today.
Thanks, Karen. It's been a pleasure.
And now for our WTF at Work segment.
Say what?
So joining me now is Alana McLean. Alana, what crazy workplace scenario do you have for us?
Good morning. Oh, another doozy coming
Excellent.
your way to decipher. Let's have a look at this week's. I worked in a team comprised of mostly men. The boss used to invite all of the young white male co-workers over to his house for poker nights almost every week. They would have late nights and my male co-workers would often come into work late and hungover. No women were ever invited to play poker night, and it was very clear that those very same men were the ones that were given opportunities that the rest of us weren't. WTF. Oh, the old boys' night.
Boys' night. This is classic. I can't tell you how often I see leaders make a similar mistake where, we've just heard about unconscious biases, right? Whether or not the individual is actually sitting there saying, I don't want the girls at poker night, that's not that common.
Yep.
It's more just an unconscious awareness about that equal opportunity. And we're actually in a workplace here, right? So yes, you're the boss and you're off duty and you're at home and you're having a wow of a time. But you're still the employer. So there is a risk individuals who aren't invited are actually feeling excluded, are feeling not as privileged.
Yeah, it's
on
an
some
interesting
level.
one as well, because I was thinking about this when I read it, and I think the only point that it gets to where it feels like, oh, that's not okay, is the opportunities being offered.
Yes.
Because I think if we said, oh, us girls are going out to lunch to have a champagne, no one would bat an eyelid at that.
Yeah.
So there is that sort of social element of that, which is maybe still okay.
And it might
Or
also
should we
be the regularity of it, right? Because it's a weekly event, it's an opportunity to get close to the boss, build those relationships. If it wasn't a once-off or a periodic thing, it would be less likely to get attention.
Yep.
So again, people have to be really careful because again, the girls going out for a drink, I can't tell you how many times I've seen other women who now all of a sudden feel excluded. Now all of a sudden there's accusations of bullying. And so clearly we don't want to squash the fun.
No,
we want to be able to go out for a
course,
drink or have poker nights.
I love poker. I'll play.
Well, that's the key. That's the key issue there, right? To
Up
this
the ante.
leader, is there's no need for you to feel deprived and unable to spend that time or even get to know the rest of the team if they're open-minded to the fact that women can be at the poker table.
Yeah. How do you go at poker?
I wouldn't have a
But who cares? You still want to be there.
zero clue.
Yeah.
No, I'm the kind of woman that'd be more than happy for them just to go do
See
their
ya,
poker.
bye.
But
Yeah.
if it was a bunch of girls doing that as well, that's
And I
also
think
fine.
the issue of coming in overtly hungover and late, and that there's exclusions that are applying in regards to that sort of circumstance that maybe aren't getting applied. For
I think
other
that's the
people
bigger
being
issue.
late. Yeah.
Is it's clearly the leader is not leading by example, and again I go back to the martial arts world. Is that the way we would expect sensei to behave? No. Doesn't mean you can't have fun. Doesn't mean you can't relax with your team. Doesn't mean you can't have a few drinks. But to then allow the standard to get so
And the
sloppy,
allowances.
as a consequence of the good time is the real issue.
Oh, well, I think we've just nutted that one right out. If anyone wants to play poker, save it for Crown Casino.
And make sure you're inviting the girls. There's nothing gender related about the ability to play poker.
Love it.
Thank you, Alana. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you being with us again. So joining me next is GEMMA LLOYD. GEMMA is the CEO and founder of Work 180. GEMMA's mission is to empower every woman to choose a workplace where they can thrive, which is the reason we have her on our show today to explore what she sees in the world of gender bias. GEMMA, welcome to Black Belt Leader.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a bit about the work 180 does, and why did you start this organisation?
Yeah, sure. So what we do is we provide women and underrepresented groups with a place they can go and find employers that are genuinely committed to supporting everyone in their workplace and truly want those people there. And how that all came about is I spent 10 years working in the tech sector, working for what I refer to now as archaic boys club type environments, and felt some of that unconscious bias myself. One company then I worked for was amazing. My boss was a woman. It was culturally diverse. It was age diverse, and there were noticeable differences in the productivity and the engagement of that organisation. And so the inspiration came to start Work 180. So we are a global company across Australia, the UK, recently launched into the US, and work with employers from the big end of town, such as Microsoft, BHP, NAB, all the way through to small startups who want to get diversity right from the beginning.
Yeah. And so what's at the heart of what you're helping these organisations to do and understand? Where do you start, and what are some of the strategies that you're typically deploying?
What we do is we pre-screen the organisations on a set of about 35 criteria questions. And so that ranges from everything to parental leave policies. We want to make sure that their parental leave policies are gender neutral, for example. Also, not just having sort of primary and secondary, making sure men can take equal amounts of parental leave. Like LLOYD has a fantastic policy around that truly provides equality. And then we've got questions around if they have cultural and linguistic diversity in leadership targets as well. We've got 8 employers on the platform that have those targets. And so by asking all of these questions, we then benchmark the employers, we show them what their competition is doing. And so it creates this want and drive to kind of be a really progressive employer because they can see others doing it.
Yeah.
And in addition to the policy piece, also rolling out consulting as well if it's quite new to them. And then we make that information transparent on our website around what employers are doing.
So really what I'm hearing you say is that you're focused on equality. It's not just about the gender, it's about human beings being given a fair go and treated fairly.
That's right. So the hub itself was designed for women to come to and find those workplaces because that's where we really see that disparity.
Yeah.
However, as you mentioned, our purpose is every woman, and that truly means women of colour. It means women in the LGBTI community. It means if you're a woman with a disability. That's very important. But I think the thing for men to recognise is that through our criteria and how we're working with employers, we are driving better workplaces for them as well.
Yeah. Look, absolutely appreciate and respect that because I think that's right. In my experience, also having male champions of change are fundamental. So if we can be putting a spotlight on organisations where men are actively engaged in supporting all of their colleagues to fairly get ahead, I think that's a great thing. So what does the research tell us about gender bias? What's your understanding of what really drives that?
Oh, it's absolutely rife, and particularly, unfortunately, in Australia, as we can see, apps and stats of women in leadership. It's really a systemic issue that it's the way our workplaces are structured. It's how our unconscious bias comes into play. So, for example, I was alluding to it before with our paid parental leave. The government legislates that women get 18 weeks paid parental leave, men get 2 weeks. Now, if we look at countries like Iceland, they have equal for both. It is mandatory that both the mothers and fathers take both. Also, that kind of system isn't really set up for that we have in Australia for LGBTI couples as well to have children. So that's why, we've got to start from that big picture government legislation, which now we see private sector kind of taking the lead on it. You've got the Deloittes of the world who are saying, well, even though the government have set the minimum, we're going above and beyond and we're going to do other types of amazing things. So, that's just one part of it. Another is flexible working. making sure that flex isn't just but everyone. And, we truly at Work 180 see the benefits of flexible working. So we have 40 people across the globe. We all work from home. We did pre-COVID work from home. Yeah, and it's we get amazing productivity and engagement from the team.
Yeah. So I'm going to divert us for a quick moment there to tap into your experience with that. What really helps you and your team to be successful working in that way?
So we've been around for 5.5 years, and it has taken trial and error, I think, to get to a point where the remote working is working incredibly well. But I'm really proud to say that now our team says they feel more connected than they did in an office pre-Work 180. So I think there's a couple of keys to making it successful. It's being very structured with meetings and how you have those meetings, the cadence of them, what's included in them. It's also making sure that you work. So trust me, when you're remote, you cannot communicate enough. Also facilitating social connection. So, in an office, we have the water cooler chats, but with Work 180, we've got different channels for pets on our internal social network. We've got a plants channel. We also, at the end of the week, have a success call. So we all jump on and talk about the wins for the rest of the week. We have something called Donut, which pairs you randomly with someone in your company to have a donut with.
That's great. So, and how is this donut process facilitated? Do you send each other a donut?
So it's a plug-in into Slack, and so it will automatically connect you. And if you're in the same state, people usually go out for a donut or a coffee together if they're being a bit healthier. But or if they're in a different state, they'll do it via Zoom.
Yeah, it's fantastic because I totally agree. It's not that working in isolation is necessarily going to get the best from us, but there are loads of ways in which we can actually have what I describe as a blended way of working. So we are taking advantage of that at home opportunity and the flexibility, and obviously we'll take it back to, again, gender bias. I do think there's a lot of opportunity for family obligations to be more readily and easily met and juggled, in what is becoming a new way of working. So, again, I'm assuming that you're quite excited about what this time is bringing to really shift leaders' perceptions of what is possible. Are you starting to see leaders start to go, oh, actually, flexible work practices might be something we can do better?
Absolutely. It's been really interesting over the last couple of months where employers have been forced into this new way of work. And surprise, surprise, we're all going, oh, actually, this is really working. We are much more productive. Our team is happier, So anyway, something I think many of us have known a long time, but
I've
but
had
it's good
so
to
much
see
fun
nonetheless.
watching it. There's some of the leaders I work with still, their immediate go-to mindset is they want to work from home. They must want to skive off. Or they must not really care about their job. But so many other leaders who are saying to me, actually, this works for me and my team. So again, that awareness, I think, is going to help us to see some real change.
Oh, absolutely. We working from home absolutely does not mean that the team is skiving off. And at the end of the day, if you are managing your team correctly and you have your objectives set, your outcomes set, you're measuring performance, then you should not be afraid of skiving off. You've got the numbers and you've got the data there, which will. So there's absolutely no reason in this day and age why we can't work remotely and work to whatever way suits us the best, which means we're all more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first thing I say to leaders that put out that argument is, and you don't think they're ever skiving off in the office?
Yeah, exactly.
People know how to fly under the radar of accountability. Just because you're looking at them doesn't mean they're engaged. So help us understand, obviously it's clear what the benefits for our community are, but what's the real benefits for employers in getting this right, in having a diverse workplace? What's the flow on impact to their bottom line, their performance?
So there's a couple of stats I might mention. The first was a study done by a company called BetterUp, which is an employee engagement organisation. And they tested the value of belonging. So you've got diversity, and diversity is the different types of people in the room. Then you've got inclusion. So that's making sure that those different types of people are actually heard. And then there's belonging, which takes it a step further. And that's really when you feel you can be your authentic self and bring 100% of you into the workforce. Now, with belonging, it showed that there was a 56% increase in job performance when people felt like they could belong, which is absolutely huge. And what that translated to over, for every 10,000 people an employer hires, that's a $25 million a year cost saving.
Yeah, it's massive.
And the second piece of research, which has just been released by the Workplace Gender Equality Agency here in Australia, was that if you increase the number of women in your leadership team by 10%, it translates to a market value increase on average of $105 million for your ASX companies. So, yeah, that's world first research, because for the first time, and I encourage everyone to go and have a look at the papers, but for the first time, there was always a correlation between women and gender balance and performance, but this actually proved out a direct link with those numbers.
Absolutely love it. It's great to see the data telling the story. One last question for you before we run out of time. You know, what do you think employers can be doing to support Black Lives Matter movement? You know, what relevance does that have for employers right now?
Yeah, well, for employers, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before around the feeling of belonging. And if employers aren't taking a really firm stance to ensure that all of their people, including their Black people, feel like they can belong, then, you know, they're not getting, and not to even mention the social, the responsibility and the right thing to do in this space. We've seen a lot of companies come out and say that they, you know, support the Black community. But what I think is really important is, okay, you support them and you're saying that's great, but what actions are actually being taken? So we need to educate, we need to advocate, and we need to make sure that we're actually driving change and making purposeful moves to include our people and to make sure that Black Lives Matter in work and in our communities.
Absolutely. Well said. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Really do appreciate it. Let our viewers know, what's your website address? How can they get in touch? Yeah,
sure. So we're work180.co, that's CO. We're also on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, so please feel free to connect with us. And I'm personally also to hear from you if you'd like to reach out.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Gemma. I really appreciate your contribution today.
Thank you, Karen.
So that's all we have time for today. If there are topics you would like us to explore, please get in touch via our website, corporatedojo.com, or, of course, any of our social media channels. And remember, you choose. Will you be an ordinary or an awesome leader of your people?
There are now more ways to watch Ticker. Download our apps for Apple and Android devices. We're live on Twitter and YouTube Live. And you can catch us on Amazon Alexa and Google Home. Head to the Ticker website for more.
Our partner Miller Leith was founded in 2012 and over the past 7 years has carved out a name synonymous with true partnerships and quality outcomes. You may know them by their blue couch logo, it's catchy. Based in Melbourne and Sydney, their focus has always been centred around true partnership with industry sectors and job groups, where they have key expertise such as FMCG, retail, supply chain, engineering, quality, sales and marketing, HR and business support. Miller Leith offers talent search for permanent and contracting roles. They also have expertise with career transition. If you're looking for an authentic talent partnership, call Miller Leith today.
Hey, good morning.
Ticker's new breakfast show.
Well, most of the time in the morning, I annoy people.
I think Ben is so fabulous. He is wild, he is warm, he is witty.
The first time I met Alana, I realised I wanted to have a drink with her.
You never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Kick off your morning with Ticker Jumpstart.
We are playing in uncharted territory.
This preparation takes me all night.
It doesn't matter how long I take, because Ben will always take longer.
Ticker Jumpstart with Benjamin Norris and Alana McLean.
You're going to get some different stuff with us, and we're going to be unapologetic for it.
You do realise it's the morning, so you don't need to be the human coffee.
Introducing Ticker Sport.
Mate, how exciting is it to kick off Ticker Sport?
Mate, I'm as pumped as you, which is pretty pumped. We're here to talk sport, business, there's a market, there's a niche.
It's David Davidovich and Adrian Franklin tackling the biggest issues.
Mate, we're talking sport, but we're talking business as well. And as you know, right now, there is no more important time. The world has changed and we are here to react.
Where nothing's off limits.
This is unprecedented.